I finished ARR last night. I was like full-time jobbing that thing to make it happen. And I got so mad because there was a super intriguing story that I will not say anything about, but there was a super intriguing story that I was so into and was like, yes, I want this. It's personal. It's wonderful. And then it's just like, you have to do Crystal Tower. What? It's like, yeah, you have to finish Crystal Tower, otherwise you can't keep going. And I'm like, but I don't want to. I want the personal stuff. The second half of A Realm Reborn storytelling is fantastic. Like, I cannot praise it enough. It gives you 2 to 4 story threads at a time, but does them in a way that you are never lost. Like, it will say, hey, we're following this story thread now, but this other thread will be mentioned, and sometimes A plot will weave into B plot a little bit, like they'll cross in some regard. Fantastic setup. I was so invested the entire time. As you guys know, that there's kind of like, how to say it, there's a couple different ways to tell stories. One of them is like a super localized, like 2 big ones for fantasy is super localized, like it's you having, you know, like imagine like it doesn't go further than like a town, you know, like it's connected to a handful of players are in there. You're like, okay, this person's important, this person's important. We're getting like personal stuff from each of them. You're learning more about it. You're uncovering stuff. And then the other one is like, the world is ending. We need your help. Everybody's gonna die. Da 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 da. And it's very irritating where you're in like this very personal mystery style thing. Ooh, what's gonna happen? What players are involved? You know, like who's doing what? Who, you know, like what's going where? Oh, we just got some new information which gives me like more potential things to think about, and like, this is so like nice and contained. And then halfway through it, the game puts a barrier between you and the story and says, you have to go save the world now. And you cannot go back to the personal story until you save the world. And it genuinely made Crystal Tower less enjoyable for me because I wanted to keep doing the personal story. Afterwards, I finished Crystal Tower, and I had some people being like, oh, how'd you like Crystal Tower? It was cool, right? I'm like, it was annoying. Like, the story was fine, but the whole time, because I'm being forced to do it, I'm resenting it because I want to keep going. Like, imagine for a second that you're in the middle of, like, I don't know, like a murder mystery, for instance, you know? Like, imagine, like, a classic whodunit, the train is always moving kind of thing, and you're trying to figure out who killed, you know, like, Colonel Mustard. You know, like, who done it? You know, like, and you're going through peeps and you're trying to figure out, you're like talking to people and you're just like, Mrs. Peacock, where were you at 7:10 a.m. this morning? Da da da. It's like, well, I was in my chambers doing da 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 da. And you're like, okay, yeah. And then at one point somebody comes up to you and just like, I have information to tell you that Mrs. Peacock was in fact not in her chambers at 7:10 a.m. And you're like, oh my god, but that doesn't mean that she's particularly done it because this is the thing, da da da. And like, you know, like, oh, the person was killed by a gun, and I know, and like, you know already through like some other stuff that Mrs. Peacock is like afraid of guns because like as a child she had a traumatic experience. You're like, oh well, it couldn't be her, but what if something else? Blah, 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 blah. And you're just like, yeah. And then all of a sudden you're like just about to go and talk to Mrs. Peacock again, and you get literally like teleported out of the train, this place that you don't know anything about. You have to deal with that now. And you cannot figure out the stuff on the train until you're done. And also, the implications of the thing that you're forced to do right now is colossal in scale. Like, it is literally the train, there was a murder and you have to figure it out, versus someone's about to detonate a frickin' bomb and you have to figure out a way to deal with it. But the person who is detonating the bomb is like immortal, and like nothing that you can do this present time will actually make them stop, so you have to figure out a way to make them not mortal. And also, did you know that this bomb is like legitimately going to put a hole in the earth the size of Texas, and if they do that, it's going to cause literal like end of the world situations. And it's just like, I mean, that's neat and all, but I wanted to figure out who killed Colonel Mustard. That's where my brain is right now. That's all I care about. Don't do this game. Don't don't take this. Do this after A Realm Reborn is done. You're doing it in the wrong spot. Other than that, like, the actual story of Crystal Tower is fine. It's good. It has layers to it. It has a nice beginning and end. You learn a bunch of things. You know that it's going to be relevant later because there's no way they would force you to do this if it wasn't relevant later. So it's like, okay, cool. You've given me another puzzle piece. Unfortunately, you're forcing me to go and play another puzzle when I'm intently working on a current puzzle and I'm halfway through it and I think I'm starting to see what it looks like. And now you're telling me to start with a brand new puzzle. And it's like, I'm not happy with what you're doing right now. Anyway, Rant over. Was genuinely just flabbergasted. Like, it was very irritating. It genuinely bothered me.